going to introduce you guys.
Okay. In the theater.
In the theater?
Yes. Is it 15 minutes still?
Welcome, everybody. Hello, hello. Hello. It was my privilege to just give these guys a tour of the sanctuary. So they've been here for a couple hours now, and then we met with Lauren, who talked about the different research projects we're doing. And their office is out of Portland, Oregon, and they're going to kind of tell us what they do with sanctuaries in Africa for primates. And Greg Tully and Catherine Bach.
Would you guys like the overhead light on?
This being the overhead light?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is
Sure.
nice. Yeah.
Sure.
Do you wanna? Okay. Hi, I'm Caitlin. I'm the Administration and Communications Manager. Greg and I are really happy to be here. I'm locally from Tampa, actually. It's my first time here, so it's really nice to get to see everyone and get to see the sanctuary. Yeah, so there's going to be a few graphic images in the beginning of the presentation. It's nothing too bad, but we do try and warn people, let them know ahead of time. And feel free to ask any questions during the presentation. Makes it a bit more interesting, and then we'll save some time at the end for questions too.
Could you speak up a little bit for the old people?
Yes, I can. I will project.
And for Facebook.
Okay, yeah.
You're a long way away.
Great, okay. So we are PASA, or the Pan-African Sanctuary Alliance. And we want to start out today by telling you guys a little bit about Suena. So Suena is a male chimpanzee. He spent 14 years alone in a cage. He was locked in this cage, was never let out, never felt grass at his feet, the rain on his skin, was never allowed to climb a tree or interact with other animals. And as you might know, chimpanzees are really social, just like humans. So a situation like this was pretty devastating for him. And he wasn't alone. He was at this sanctuary, actually also called Suena, and we use the term sanctuary pretty loosely here. The people that ran the sanctuary basically abandoned the place. There was a few staff, caregivers still remaining, but there was no money. They didn't have any money to feed Suena. They didn't have any money to feed any of the animals there. So they were basically starving and also in terrible condition and just in terrible cages. So it became pretty clear when people came from the outside and saw this place, oh wow, these animals need to be rescued. So
Was
something
this in South Africa? Or where
this is actually in the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Okay.
So PASA was able to fund a rescue mission. We were able to organize and fund the entire operation to save Suena, move him and all the other animals to appropriate sanctuaries. So Suena and another chimpanzee were brought to a PASA member sanctuary called Luwiro, also in DRC. And an operation like this is pretty involved. We have some photos of it in their transport cages. And this was a great step, and some of the other animals went to other sanctuaries close by too. So, this was great. On the surface, Suena has this happy ending. But as some of you guys might know, just arriving at a sanctuary is not, the end of the story. There's a lot that happens afterwards, and Suena really struggled to adjust after he arrived. So he was originally kept with another chimpanzee, which they thought this would be great, he's been alone all these years. But it wasn't going great. He was still really reeling from the trauma he'd been through, and he was lashing out, he was aggressive to the other chimpanzee, he was really aggressive to the caregivers. They had to isolate him again, and it was just really trying and, really exposes how this trauma just lingers on throughout their lives. So, fortunately, help arrived. So PASA, as an organization, we stepped in and helped fund specialists from another PASA member sanctuary to come to Luwiro and help the caregivers and the staff integrate Suena with another chimpanzee and make that introduction. And it took some time, but the staff at Luwiro said, they really appreciated having the specialists come, and through this process, it really built up their confidence, and they were able to make that introduction, and Suena met other chimpanzees. We actually have a video of that. This is the first time he's meeting another chimpanzee, male chimpanzee. This video right here, and hopefully it plays. So this is going really well. They just kind of play wrestling. So that's great. Like, that's basically as good as it could go. And Suena's still meeting other chimpanzees right now. This is really recent. This happened a couple months ago. So yeah, it went really well, and thanks to what we call our Primate Care Training Program, which is what brought this specialist over, this was possible. And now Suena's not alone anymore, and finally he's really starting to build back trust with other people, other chimpanzees, and heal from that trauma that he'd been through. And Suena's only the beginning. We want to do this for a lot of animals because a lot of animals that arrive at sanctuaries from rescues are in pretty rough shape. But we also sort of want to emphasize that Suena is, like, by no means, you know, an oddity. This is very common, and he's actually really lucky because he's one of the few that was rescued. Oops. Okay. You want to talk?
Sure. All right, so yeah, as Caitlin said, Suena's situation is not unique, and these are all pictures of primates across Africa in horrible situations, and sort of feels like a never-ending battle to try to rescue them and bring them to PASA member sanctuaries. And on the bigger scale, you know, our closest relatives are nearer to extinction than they've ever been before. The statistics are shocking. You know, 3/4 of primate species around the world are in decline. 60% are threatened with extinction. Every year we lose 3,000 great apes from the wild from a wide range of causes. The bushmeat crisis is, you know, we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but that's become a huge issue. Some of these animals are smuggled to China where they end up in inhumane roadside zoos. Some of them end up in private pet collections of wealthy people in the Middle East. The illegal pet trade in primates is an issue all in Africa and worldwide. And these animals just live miserable lives filled with suffering. It's really, really heartbreaking. So these are a couple of photos that we found on the internet. So this one on the left is from Instagram, and this Amazon Pet is a known wildlife dealer. And at the bottom it says, "Coming soon, #gorilla, #myDubai." So Amazon Pet is saying this baby gorilla is coming to Dubai soon, so place your bids. This picture is from Kuwait. This guy's hanging out in his living room with a baby orangutan, a baby gibbon, and a baby chimpanzee. And yeah, it's cute now, but I don't even want to think about what's going to happen to these animals a few years later when they're big and potentially aggressive, and it's not safe to have them in the living room anymore. There's not going to be anywhere for them to go. Yeah, these are, you know, you see just the way people treat some of these animals is just awful. You know, putting them in makeup and babies' clothes, teaching them to drink beer and smoke from a hookah. In this picture in the middle, these chimps are in the process of being trafficked out of Africa, and the smugglers will often take pictures as proof that they have the chimps, so they can set up the bank transfers and the transportation and everything to, you know, some of these baby chimps can go for $10,000. And on top of the wildlife trafficking, you know, as I'm sure you know, habitat loss is a huge issue in many countries, especially Africa. Not just the habitat destruction, but also fragmentation of the habitat and people exploiting it by, you know, cutting down firewood and farming in protected land. Logging and mining and agriculture are all big issues. The palm oil industry that's devastated so much of Southeast Asia is now growing rapidly in Africa as well. So I'm very worried that that's going to become the next big environmental crisis. And yeah, we're losing millions of acres of forest every month. And I touched on the bushmeat trade before, and yeah, it's absolutely horrific, and it's growing fast. It's growing largely because of habitat fragmentation. Yeah, as new mines and new logging projects open up in the forests in Africa, the companies cut roads through the wilderness to get to these projects, and those roads give hunters access to huge areas that they couldn't reach before, or areas that they might have needed to walk for days to get to can now be reached in a truck in a couple hours. So gives them access to a lot of populations of wildlife for hunting. Often with primates, poachers will shoot all the adults that they can in a family, and the babies are too small to be killed for meat. There's just not enough meat on them. So they sell them on the black market as illegal pets. And the babies who are confiscated from this illegal trade generally go to sanctuaries that are members of PASA. So those are the lucky ones. And researchers have found that for every baby ape who's rescued, an estimated 10 of them are slaughtered. So the animals that we're seeing are just a tiny fraction of the scale of this problem. Do you guys have any questions? Yeah.
So you mentioned palm oil, huge issue. It's in everything. Are there any websites or anything that promote products that don't have palm oil in them, or anywhere we can go to research that?
There is. There's I'm drawing a blank on the name of it now.
I think there's an app from Colorado. I think it's
Yeah.
the Denver Zoo, maybe.
I think it is the
Yeah.
Denver Zoo. Yeah, if you search an app store for sustainable palm oil or Denver Zoo palm oil, you should get an app where I haven't used it myself, but people have told me you can you can just scan a product and it should tell you if it's sustainable or not. There's also what is it? The
RSPO.
round
Yeah,
table.
RSPO round something. Yeah,
Round Table for Sustainable Palm Oil.
yeah.
That's
what
a-
it is.
yeah. Team effort. They have a website, and that's a good source of information too. But yeah, it's hard. It's really hard to avoid buying palm oil.
Some people would say that sustainable palm oil doesn't even exist. So yeah, it's definitely a contentious topic.
Mhm. Any other questions, comments? Yeah, I wish I had a great answer for you about, oh, here's the way to solve buying palm oil, but there isn't. It's
You go to the store, you're like, I don't want animal products, I don't want anything tested on animals, I don't want palm oil, I don't want this, and you walk out with nothing. You know?
Yeah.
yeah. And in Africa, something that makes everything harder is the widespread corruption and just the hapless government agencies. Bribery is widespread. So there's some major conservation threats that we're dealing with. Even globally, the extinction rates are up to 100 times the baseline rate. So I can't say enough that we all need to do everything we can to try to protect species from extinction. It's right now we're losing the battle. All right, so that's enough of the dark stuff. I'll try to be a little more positive now. So, the Pan-African Sanctuary Alliance is the organization we work for. It's the largest association of wildlife centers and sanctuaries in Africa. We have 23 members in 13 countries across Africa that are all working to give a future to Africa's primates and their habitat. So PASA members are all in Africa, and they all take care of primates. Some take care of other species as well. Some of them do take care of big cats. But when it was founded, the focus was on primates. And the founders of these organizations are amazing people. They're, a lot of them just sort of accidentally started a sanctuary by rescuing one animal and then another animal, and it grew from there. And now they have decades of experience protecting wildlife, negotiating with the governments, working with communities, getting to know the community leaders and building relationships. So they're in a fantastic position to produce long-term changes in order to protect endangered species and their habitats. Altogether, they give jobs to more than 500 people across Africa, and they put more than $5 million into local economies every year.
How do they get that? Is it through fundraising?
Yeah, it's through fundraising. Yeah, each PASA member is an independent, most of them are just a single small nonprofit, and Yeah, it's through their fundraising. Which is their biggest challenge. Yeah, most of them will say over and over again that what they need the most help with is fundraising. It's sort of a typical mix of grants, a few major donors who have been supporting them for ages, and some smaller donors. Some of them have paid volunteer programs. You know, it's like go to Africa, volunteer, and pay a chunk of money for it. But that's a struggle. All right, this map shows where our members are. You can see they're pretty widely spread across sub-Saharan Africa.
Please excuse my lack of intelligence. I have to go back to basics, real basics.
Sure.
We're talking about apes,
Yeah, apes and monkeys.
right?
Yeah.
Where would they be found in Africa? Every place? Or
In
just
the
some places?
wild or
In the wild, yeah. I mean, where every place?
generally dense forests. That's their most common
But I
habitat.
mean, you got a picture there of Africa. So is it every place in Africa?
Every country.
Every country? I mean,
Well, I would say, feel free to chip in. I would say that this sort of tropical, what you'd call like jungle, like, you know, sort of rainforest and dense forest belt, that actually sort of goes like here. This is the main primate habitat and the ape habitat. Some of these sanctuaries are not in range countries. So for example, like there's a chimpanzee sanctuary in Kenya, another one in South Africa, Zambia. Like chimps don't live in the wild there, but sanctuaries formed because of trafficking. You know, there used to be a big trade route of wildlife going from the deep forests here down to South Africa, and then they'd fly them around the world. So that's why we end up with this sort of chain of sanctuaries along the trade route. So where the sanctuaries are doesn't exactly show you where the wildlife is in the wild. But I mean, the apes are basically around here, monkeys down into South Africa. You know, not much in the desert there, a little bit of monkeys up there.
and are they shipping these apes worldwide? Are they shipping them to different places? Or
Yeah, they send them worldwide.
Every country is raising their own, and so you don't have to get one from Africa or
Yeah, no, breeding,
breeding. Yeah.
there isn't much illegal breeding that I know about. It's typically, they'll
It's like poaching. It's just poaching.
Yeah, they'll set up a whole chain where somebody who lives in a village deep in the forest will catch it, and let's say it's a chimpanzee. Well, you know, shoot down a couple adult chimpanzees, steal the baby, sell it to somebody for a pretty small amount of money. That person drives it to the city, sells it to somebody else for more money. They'll put it into a big crate packed with, I don't know, maybe dried fish or maybe some other animals that you can legally ship without permits, you know, maybe birds, and something to hide them. Ship them to Dubai, Beijing, anywhere for even more money, and by the time it gets to the final owner, it could be worth $10,000.
Is it illegal to own a monkey or ape?
It varies from country to country. Strangely, in America, it's not. You can, in most African countries, it's illegal to own primates as pets. In America, there are ways around that. But then there are a lot of people who, a lot of countries, the laws just aren't enforced.
Do the sanctuaries in Africa get monkeys and apes from other countries like America or South America, Asia, or they kind of have their own sanctuaries in those places?
That's
I
a good
guess?
question. Yeah, we try. It does happen sometimes.
Yeah.
Whenever somebody contacts us about a primate in need, we just try to find the best solution for it. In some cases, if it's already in Europe and there is a sanctuary in Europe that has space for it, that's the best solution instead of trying to raise who knows how many thousands of dollars to ship the animal back to Africa. But no, there have been something. There was just a few months ago, a chimpanzee was in Iraq, living all alone in a little cage in a particularly war-torn part of Iraq, and chimps are very social. Like they need to be with other chimps to be emotionally healthy. And this chimp was just in isolation, dressed up in clothes. You could pay some money and take your picture with it. Typical situation. And they found that the chimp was not in the country legally, and so we wrote some letters to the Iraqi government. Some other organizations did, and we managed to convince them to let the chimp go to Sweetwater's Chimpanzee Sanctuary in Kenya. And he's there now, and he's being integrated with a big social group there and living in a huge enclosure. So it does happen. But sometimes the legal aspects get tough. You know, in most cases, if there's an ape or an animal in a zoo in China, it's like, what can you do? You know, if they're not breaking laws and if they don't want to give it up, there's not a lot we can do about that. Yeah.
I was just curious, you've mentioned like Iraq in this story, and it seems like the Middle East might be a problem. Where does the U.S. fit in as far as bringing illegal, doing the illegal trafficking? Are there a lot of primates brought to the U.S.?
I don't hear about that. I don't think so. I think from everything that I've heard, if somebody in the U.S. wants a baby chimp or a baby monkey, they'll buy it from a breeder in the U.S. That seems to be the major route.
Okay, well that's one, not much, but.
Yeah. So at least they're not, at least they're not being caught by their whole families being shot down and being smuggled from Africa. But I mean, there's still problems with that area as well. Keeping wildlife as pets tends to bring a whole bunch of problems with it. Anything else? All right. So this slide shows PASA members take care of all African primates. Cute little monkeys up to gorillas. So, how did PASA start? Well, in 2000, there were a number of more and more primate sanctuaries were being formed, and like I said, a lot of them were these little sort of mom and pop organizations. They weren't communicating with each other, they weren't learning from each other, and a group of primatologists and conservationists recognized this, and so they held a meeting in Uganda and brought together the leaders of all of these sanctuaries for the first time. The first time they all met face to face. And the major questions at this meeting were, do you all want to communicate with each other more? And if so, what does that look like? And the main outcome was the decision to form PASA. So even though now we're a registered nonprofit in the US and we're based in Oregon, but PASA was very much formed by the sanctuaries in Africa. So it started out as a loose affiliation, mainly for communicating, but over time, PASA's developed more and more roles. We've established a set of high standards for animal care, not just animal care, but sort of many aspects of organizational operations to help our members to work to the highest possible standards. We have an accreditation process, so all of our members are reaccredited every 5 years. And we fill a number of other roles to build the capacity of these sanctuaries in Africa. And this has become a model that's been copied in other continents around the world. So because PASA has this close partnership with wildlife protection organizations across Africa, we're in a fairly unique niche. PASA ourselves works addressing conservation issues on a large scale, international or national scale. And our members have this amazing local expertise that comes from their decades of work on the ground, working with communities, running conservation projects. So this combination of the two puts us in a great position to make a long-term impact on conservation issues. Do you want to take over from here, or should I keep going?
Yeah.
All right.
Taking turns. So how do we work for our member sanctuaries? Well, kind of in a bunch of different ways. First of all, we advocate for them worldwide. A lot of our members are in these really remote areas of Africa. They have really, limited access to resources, the internet. They're small organizations. So we have, a global stage in many ways because we're located in the US. We can do things like, give talks and presentations, show up here, go to conferences for them, share their story. So, yeah, we advocate for our members worldwide. And we work with our members very closely to raise awareness about the issues and also, rescues that come in, stories from them. We help share that. And another way we do it is that we are also working with them in ways like enabling rescues. Like we talked about Suena in the beginning. PASA was involved in that rescue, and PASA is involved in a lot of rescues for the animals that end up at member sanctuaries. So, how do we protect primates? As an organization, as our members, that's really our big goal here. That's why we exist, and that's what we're focused on. So obviously, one of the biggest ways we can do this is by fighting trafficking. And these are photos of actual chimpanzees being trafficked. We talked about it earlier, but great apes are being smuggled worldwide. Right now, it's the 4th biggest illegal industry in the world. And we have a few different ways that we sort of combat this.
When you say 4th, is that just primates? Because we usually say like after drugs and guns, just the illegal wildlife trade of wild animals, just in
it's
general.
wildlife.
Okay.
So when traffickers are caught, if there is not a place to bring the animals that they've been trying to traffic, then very often the local law enforcement will just let the traffickers go. So it's really important that sanctuaries exist in these places, because very often if they have no other place to go, they're not going to press charges, they're not going to go after the traffickers. So it's like a really crucial piece of the puzzle. And PASA members make these arrests possible by working with the local governments and saying, yep, we're here, we're going to take the animals. And then of course PASA, we coordinate some of these rescues, and we ensure that the animals that are being confiscated are placed in appropriate sanctuaries. And then we don't just stop there. We pressure the governments, we pressure law enforcement to prosecute traffickers and get justice for the animals, that they were trying to smuggle. So we write letters. Yeah.
So you're saying you're working with pressuring these lawmakers or etc. Is there a country that you would say holds a standard for prosecuting traffickers, or whatever the average punishment would be if someone was, say, caught trying to take an ape out of that country to a neighboring country? Or is there not really much standard set at all?
I don't know of any country in Africa that I would say does a good job of prosecuting wildlife crimes. Some are better than others. I think Kenya.
The laws are different too.
Yeah. The Kenya Wildlife Service and the Uganda Wildlife Authority definitely accomplish a lot.
Those are, two of the more developed countries in Africa as well.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
Isn't something like that sometimes really hard in Africa, because when they go to the sheriff's department or something, they know each other because it's all very small and everybody knows each other, so they just let them go?
Yeah.
And they just say, just give a little money to somebody, and that could be enough for the guy to feed his family for next week, and so they just let them go.
I mean, there's been instances of the law enforcement agencies taking the animals and keeping them maybe in their office, or giving them to people they know, selling them, so it's pretty corrupt. But anecdotally, we've noticed that countries that don't have a wildlife sanctuary tend to have lower rates of prosecuting traffickers. So definitely makes a difference simply just existing and having a space there.
How do government agencies even know where to find you guys?
Yeah, well, a lot of our PASA members actually have really, long-standing working relationships with the local authorities and the local governments. So it's been going on for a long time. They have these relationships. They know to contact them. And it's sort of like if they build it, they will come, If they find out, oh, you guys are taking care of baby chimps, oh, we've got baby chimps, and they show up. And it can even create a problem where the local governments say, the sanctuaries can be at capacity, and the governments say, well, you have to take this animal. So, but they have long-standing relationships with them. In some sanctuaries, in some countries, it's better than others. But it's something that, we're all actually trying to work on all the time. And when we talk with each other, the sanctuaries are trying to work out better ways to work with the governments, and, what worked for you last year, that sort of thing. Yeah?
I think Afton was first, so.
Oh.
Didn't can see back there.
Yeah, the shadows.
So when dealing with trafficking, you're basically probably dealing with like infants and babies.
Yeah.
Is there any way of rehabbing for release any of these?
Yeah, we're actually going to
Okay, I
talk
didn't know
about.
if I was jumping the gun.
No, yeah, we'll touch on that a little bit later.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, when possible, definitely.
So for the trafficking, maybe I misunderstood, but in order for the traffickers to be prosecuted, does there have to be a sanctuary in the specific country where the trafficker is caught, or could the sanctuary be in the neighboring country?
Yeah.
There doesn't have to be a sanctuary, but for law enforcement officials in rural areas, if they see somebody, let's say they're at a border post and they see a truck come by and they open the trunk and there's a baby chimpanzee. If there's not a sanctuary nearby, they don't know what to do with a baby chimpanzee. They don't want to deal with it. They don't want to have to take care of it and try to figure out how to feed it. So it's a lot easier for them to just take a bribe and look the other way and let the truck drive through. So it's not that there must be a sanctuary, but it's going to facilitate law enforcement if there is a system in place to answer the question, what do you do with live animals that you confiscate? Does that explain it?
It does, yeah.
So sort of touching on these rescues and how these happen, we kind of wanted to give you like a behind the scenes insider look at a very recent rescue that happened, and it's not a great story. It's really awful. So this happened actually just before Christmas, so just a few weeks ago. Basically, there's an organization called Eagle which helps PASA members in certain countries with rescues. They were called and said, we have a situation where a chimpanzee is in a really bad environment, bad situation, it's grave, you have to come right away. And when they arrived, even though they've been doing rescues for years, they described it as one of the worst they've ever seen. It was truly horrific. And it was not just one chimpanzee, it was 3 chimpanzees, only one was still alive. A baby, and it's this one here, they found basically just crumpled in the corner like that. The 2 chimpanzees that had just died were apparently her mother and her sister. And we have a lot of different details, but we do know that the mother and sister fought for hours trying to protect this little baby. The mother was shot at a certain time, baby got hit too. The sister was tortured for hours. They set dogs on her, she was tied up, she was beaten, and it was described that she was trying to protect the baby sister, and remarkably the littlest baby did live, and her sister, who was also very young, a very small chimpanzee, died, did not make it. So not only did this little baby just watch her mother and sister be brutally murdered and also experience torture herself, but she was really suffering a lot of other ways. She had a broken arm, she had a bullet in her arm, she had this eye infection, and then she also, at some point, they had ripped her fingernails out. So, so she was immediately taken to PASA member sanctuary. This was in Guinea. She was immediately taken to Chimpanzee Conservation Center. It's a PASA member there in Guinea. And she's still obviously healing from this trauma. It's probably going to be a really long time for her, long healing process. And we have a video of just sort of shortly after she arrived, and what that looked like and how they were taking care of her. Removing the bullet. She was about 10 months, I thought. So that's Tita. We're still raising money for her right now.
And where were these 3 found? The 2 babies and the mother? Were they owned by private owner? Or?
So it was 2 poachers.
Oh.
And I can't figure out, I've been reading all the different stories, we've been talking to the staff at our member sanctuary down there. I can't figure out why it was like this extended period of torture that happened, but yeah, they had 3 chimpanzees. They had this mom, the 2 babies, or this, one young one and this little baby, and it was a village, and for some reason, somehow they got into this episode with them.
And they weren't trying to sell them, obviously.
Well, I do think they would have tried to sell the baby if she had survived, but something got out of hand. Probably the chimpanzees were being very aggressive, not cooperating. They shot the mother, probably hopefully for bushmeat. They could sell for bushmeat, but she was in such rough shape. I mean, there was no way she was going to survive without veterinary care, particularly after this whole incident happened. So yeah,
but it is a strange story. It doesn't really all add up. I wonder if maybe they were hoping they could sell the older sister as a live pet too, and she's too aggressive, and that's why things went wrong.
Yeah, I saw the picture. She's little. So the sister that passed away, and even our veterinarian that is at this sanctuary here, she said it's very strange for the fingernails to be ripped out. She thought that was weird, and I don't think that normally happens either. So, but again, maybe they just didn't know what they were doing, and yeah. So but she's still being taken care of night and day. They say she's doing a lot better, which is great, and like we said, it's going to be a long healing journey for her. Oops, keep doing that. There we go. So other than just rescuing animals, PASA and our members, we combat trafficking in a few other ways. We're passing around some snares right now, so you can see them, the ones that are in the photo. So PASA members work with governments not only to rescue animals, but also to establish new protected areas. And they hire eco-guards then to patrol those forests, removing snares and traps, and this is another way of protecting wildlife from poachers. So PASA is not only committed to primates that are in the wild, we are also very much committed to primates that are in our member sanctuaries. And one of the best ways we can protect primates is by improving animal welfare. As a result of all those rescues we told you about and those confiscations, PASA members right now are taking care of over 3,000 great apes and monkeys, and some other animals too. So we're definitely committed to giving animals the best possible care. Not, a lot of them are going to end up living their lives in these sanctuaries, so it's really important that we have high standards for animal welfare. Someone asked about reintroductions. Yeah, PASA members definitely do reintroductions when it's possible. And we, one of the best ways to support animal welfare is by, supporting these reintroductions. Right now, in the next 2 years, PASA members plan to release at least 171 primates. That includes critically endangered great apes and monkeys. And it's not just great for the individuals that get to be reintroduced back to the wild, but also these reintroductions have led to the creation of new protected areas, which is great, particularly when you have an endangered animal. These 3 gorillas here were just recently reintroduced, which is great. We talked about this really briefly before, but PASA, as an organization, we provide accreditation for our member sanctuaries. This is pretty extensive, so it includes a background check, site visit, questionnaire, and evaluation, and it's just another way of ensuring that our members have really high standards of animal welfare and that they're sustainable organizations. And it's also good for them because it helps them, figure out where their problems are, how they can address challenges and improve. And, we check out the facilities to make sure the enclosures are maintained. And it looks great worldwide too, so people know from the outside, people in the States know, oh, that's a PASA accredited sanctuary. They have good standards of animal welfare. And this is sort of another way of promoting animal welfare is through our system of emergency support. So you guys probably know that, running a sanctuary, there's a lot of different small disasters that could happen. An enclosure could break, a tree could fall, an animal could get out. There's a lot of different small things that could really hurt your organization, put people in danger. And African sanctuaries definitely face this, and even worse too, because they don't have the resources. So things like fires, collapsed buildings, disease outbreaks. I'm sure we all heard about the Ebola outbreak. Yeah, these can really cripple a sanctuary in Africa, and it's very difficult in those moments to get funding immediately. There's not a lot of foundations out there that provide emergency grants. So it's really important for PASA to be able to support our member sanctuaries in those moments, in those times of crisis. As soon as possible, we send emergency grants. We work with our wildlife centers to address issues. It's not just sending money. We can send specialists, we can send vets over, whatever they need to help solve urgent problems. And the sooner that we help them recover from these disasters, the sooner that we make sure the animals are safe and they can get back to their day-to-day operations. We recently had a pretty devastating crisis happen to a PASA member sanctuary in Sierra Leone called Takugama. Didn't actually happen right at the sanctuary, but happened right next to it, a mudslide. I don't know if any of you guys heard about it, but it was like spring or summer last year. This horrible mudslide happened in the Freetown, which is right next to Takugama. Killed 400 people. These are children that were part of Takugama's education program. 40 children died. A lot of the staff members at Takugama lost their homes. They lost family members. So it's a good example of how an external crisis, even if it doesn't even happen directly in the sanctuary, can still, it can cripple the community, and it has, effects to the sanctuary as well, the people that work there. So PASA raised money, and we helped Takugama feed hundreds of people. They fed people for weeks and weeks. They donated clothing, other supplies, and Takugama was even taking care of orphans of the disaster. So that, it's just another good example of how animal conservation, wildlife conservation, it has really close ties to these human communities, and the ways that we engage the local communities can impact the sanctuaries that we're working with. And of course, a really crucial part of promoting conservation and protecting primates is through education. Many of the communities that surround PASA sanctuaries are living side by side with endangered species, and they don't even know it. So maybe they don't have that education, they don't have a global perspective that they know that these animals are endangered or that they're threatened. They hunt, they eat bushmeat. These are the same people that farm on protected land. They can exploit habitat in other ways, collecting firewood, burning garbage. So it's pretty important that PASA, as our community, that we are very active in promoting conservation-minded education and building programs that engage the local communities. Right now, PASA members are educating more than 500,000 people in Africa every year about the importance of wildlife and the environment and promoting conservation. And we also are giving local communities alternative livelihoods to hunting wildlife so that they, the money is not just in exploiting the environment. It can also be in saving the environment. We wanted to tell you about a really cool project that we have right now. We call it our Edutainment Films project. It started in Cameroon with our PASA member sanctuary, Sanagiyang. And it's a series of 3 20-minute films, the Ayani films. They all have sort of different focus. There's one on snares, I think there's one on farming. I can't remember what the third one is.
Bushmeat.
Bushmeat, that's right. And it's all through the eyes of this young boy. All the people in the film are African. It's really designed for an African audience. And they were able to, it's free distribution in Africa, they were able to convince the train system to actually air the Ayani films on the commuter trains in Cameroon. So 75,000 people saw these films. Of course, they're all promoting conservation and good relationships with the animals and chimpanzees. Hundreds of thousands of people saw this on national television because Sanagi Yang was able to convince them to put it on, to show the movie on television. So a lot of the other PASA members were really excited about this. They want to show the Ayani films as well. Right now we have permission to use around 20 films. It's expanded, it's not just those films anymore. JGI got involved, Jane Goodall Institute got involved. We're using some films from them. And we are expanding the program to a lot of other countries. It's a really cost-effective program too. It only costs around $1,000 to $4,000 to implement it in one African country. We have a trailer here.
This is where I live, and this is me. I'm Ayani. This gorilla is crying.
We have seen your footprints. Ayani, come back!
Help me, Nathan. Cut me loose. It's you actually who has been stealing.
Love that trailer. So yeah, so as you can see, not only does it teach people about threats facing primates and wildlife, but it also promotes compassion to the animals. Let me see if okay. Another program that we have going right now is something that we're loosely calling Kids for Compassionate Conservation. It's also an education project, but this one was started with a book that was custom made for Sanagi Yang Chimpanzee Rescue Center, also in Cameroon. Well, it's the same as the one that piloted the Edutainment program. So they started this sort of pioneering education program. It's not really, it's a book, but it's like a 5-day curriculum, and it has group activities, it has drawings, it has things that just get them out of the classroom too. It's pretty different from the standard African model of education, so it's had a lot of success and the kids really love it. It's basically, we're helping PASA members right now adapt the program to their local schools and to their education projects that they have. So yeah, we're really excited about this project, and we're expanding outside of Cameroon as well now. So, and lastly, another way that we protect primates is by helping our members grow. It's not enough just to have these programs running. PASA as an organization, we need to build the capacity of our member sanctuaries so that they're, better equipped to, have these programs and protect primates and facilitate rescues. And the way that we do that is through conferences, workshops, and trainings. A really big thing that we do every year is that we put on our Strategic Development Conference. It's hosted by a different PASA member sanctuary in a different country, typically every year, and which is another great way that we can kind of go around, see the different sanctuaries and see the locations that they're at and what they're working with. And we fund for one member of each PASA sanctuary to come to the conference. It's typically a director or a manager, and we bring them together to discuss ideas, challenges that they face, and it's a really great opportunity for them. A lot of these people are longtime volunteers. They don't have the salary, they don't have the funds to put this together themselves or travel on their own. So it's a really important thing that we're able to do for them. They've told us that they find it really valuable. It's also, great for camaraderie. A lot of these people work in isolation. I'm sure that you guys know, working at a sanctuary, compassion fatigue, it can really get you down sometimes when you're working with animals that have been oppressed for their entire lives or have faced a lot of trauma. So I also think it's great for camaraderie too. But we don't just bring them together loosely. We have real training sessions, and it's not that Greg and I give them. We let the sanctuary members and the directors run the sessions and run some of the workshops, help us build out the itinerary for the conference, and sometimes we bring other people in too. We build capacity in areas like social media. We talked about fundraising, succession planning, and veterinary issues like disease prevention. So it's a big expense every year, but it's also a really big priority for us. In addition to our Strategic Development Conference, we have workshops. So far we've held dozens of workshops across Africa in areas like education, veterinary care, reintroduction. This is a photo from a recent workshop we had. This is at Chimpanzee Wildlife Orphanage. It's one of the oldest chimpanzee sanctuaries in the world. It's in Zambia. We held a community engagement workshop, so that was an education workshop basically. We funded an education coordinator from each wildlife center to attend the workshop. And again, this is something that they wouldn't be able to do on their own. A lot of them hadn't even left their countries before, much less attended an education workshop. And we let them design the curriculum for the workshop. They led it, we just helped them sort of facilitate it. So that way, we can make sure that the workshops are really relevant to them and really, have real solutions to real problems that they're facing. And we also have trainings. So we talked in the beginning of the presentation about Suena. Suena was that chimpanzee that was really struggling to interact with other animals, interact with the caregivers. We brought specialists over. That's the Primate Care Training Program. It's a way of helping animal care staff follow internationally recognized best practices and work at a really high standard of animal welfare. So we bring highly experienced specialists over to PASA member sanctuaries, and they train the staff that work directly with the animals, and they train the managers in areas like veterinary care, enrichment, good animal husbandry, helping with introductions. So the training is highly customized to each sanctuary, and like we said, the people that we bring over are very experienced. A lot of them have worked in Africa before. Well, I think they've all worked in Africa before. Even some of them have worked at the sanctuaries themselves before. And it costs around $3,000 to train all the animal care staff at one sanctuary. And at the end, they all get this certificate that says they participated in the training program. So that's an added bonus. Did you want to?
Sure.
Okay.
All right, so sort of wrap up what Caitlin's been talking about, our members in Africa are running really effective programs. These have been long-standing, successful programs. Just a couple examples of their success is that in the Republic of Congo, over the last 10 years, they saw a decrease of 90% of the orphan chimpanzee trade. In Sierra Leone, the chimpanzee pet trade has stopped completely. 9 of our members have worked with government agencies to create new national parks and other protected areas. So they have some great successes. But there's still animals that are in horrible conditions and desperately need help. Well, actually, Layla just went to a sanctuary last week, didn't she?
A few days ago.
A few days ago. So this is one of our successes. Layla was in sort of an in-between house, sort of living in somebody's garden for months, but finally the permits were arranged, so now she's in Chimfunchi Sanctuary. There's still these 2 chimpanzees living in this weird, like, homemade cage structure in Angola. Chimpanzees in the Central African Republic who are just tied up to a tree for their entire lives. So there's still a lot more to do. And this work's only possible because of support that we get from elsewhere, because donations and partners and other supporters. It's basically, these programs are effective, but we need more resources to do them on a bigger scale. What we're doing now just isn't enough to prevent the great apes from moving towards extinction. So it feels like there's a successful model there, but we just need to ramp it up onto a much bigger scale. So science people say, like, why would I support PASA out of all these organizations out there? One thing that makes us pretty unique is that we have this combination of PASA's international perspective and our members' local expertise. Also, we can make sure that donations go to where they're really needed and that they're used efficiently. We all know there are a lot of nonprofits out there that just aren't effective, and sometimes you send money to developing countries and it disappears, but PASA members have been vetted and they're credible, effective organizations. And also, we just provide a trusted way to get money to Africa. A lot of organizations in Africa can't take donations in US dollars, they don't have bank accounts in the US, but we can reliably send money over there. If somebody wants to get involved, we're always looking for people who want to organize fundraising events, do anything else to raise awareness about conservation issues in Africa. One thing, we're always looking for donations of veterinary supplies and sort of used staff uniforms. These are really valuable. We can arrange for people to bring stuff over to Africa. A lot of times, a lot of our members will take vet supplies that are expired as long as it's within a year or so. I know some sanctuaries and zoos have just like a closet filled with old staff uniforms that they are just going to throw out eventually. But the sanctuaries in Africa would be so grateful to have them. Other ways people can help, just talking to friends and family about these issues that are going on in Africa. We have some t-shirts for sale if you're interested.
Could you actually hold those up so the people watching on Facebook, if there's a way they can buy them from you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can buy these through our website. We've got some different colors, different designs.
And they've been asking what your website is.
Oh, wow, that'll be on in about the next slide.
You have to stay on to the next slide.
Yeah,
the next slide, yeah.
Yeah, so we have t-shirts for sale. If you go to our website or send us an email, we'll be happy to ship these anywhere. Ladies cut, too. Yeah, just yesterday we got some ladies cut shirts. I think Caitlin's excited about that. Yeah, obviously social media is such an important way to raise awareness about what's going on around the world. And so if you want to follow us on social media, share the posts. I can't say enough about how valuable that is. And this is our website, pasaprimates.org. So, do you have anything else to say? Questions?
Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks. Do you guys have other questions? Yeah.
Well, I have a few.
All right, bring it on.
He has a lot of questions.
What are your respective roles and what path led you to this calling?
Okay. I can start.
I'm gonna move over so we're both in.
Oh, yes, we're both on camera.
Yeah.
I can start. I wish I had some inspiring story that I grew up surrounded by gorillas and but my background is in nonprofit management. I got a PhD in biology and thinking that I would go into teaching at university, and then I started to travel to more interesting countries, and traveling turned into volunteering, and volunteering turned into jobs, and then I worked for an animal shelter in Nepal and another animal shelter in Thailand, and then I joined PASA. So I'd say my background is more nonprofit management for international animal welfare, but definitely my life has taken a route like that. I didn't really go right into primate conservation.
And your role at PASA is? I'm
the executive director. So we're the only staff of the organization. We've got an amazing team of volunteers and the board of directors, and in terms of people working full-time with PASA, we're it. So.
Well, how does it happen that 13 sanctuaries in Africa have their headquarters in Oregon?
Well, they each one of them, that's a good question. Each one of them is an organization on their own.
Right.
So, you know, some of them, so they're all registered organizations in their own countries in Africa. And we're just an umbrella that fills in the gaps of what they're not able to do well for themselves, and we build their capacity. So they don't actually work for us. You know, we don't work for them. It's more of a partnership. But why is PASA in Oregon? There's no particular reason for that. The board, when I was hired, the board felt it was important that we be based in the U.S. to facilitate things like coming here to talk to all of you, going to conferences, board meetings, meeting with donors, things like that. And they said I could choose anywhere in the U.S. to live as long as it was near a major airport. So.
And you chose Oregon?
Yeah, I chose Oregon. I'm a cold weather person. So. Yeah.
He was shaking and cold on the tour today too. Don't let him kid you.
He was gotten soft. Yeah.
We were saying that. He's like, wow, these Florida people are showing me up. I am from Florida. I started actually in animal care. I was in animal husbandry for a little while. I got my bachelor's in environmental studies, and I started as an intern. So I interned at Center for Great Apes, which is in Wauchula. And that was sort of, I'd been involved in animal care in other ways, but that was the first time that I saw orangutans. I was like in the orangutan section, and I was like totally in love. It was like love at first sight. So after I left college, I went to Indonesia, I volunteered, and then I got a job working for Orangutan Foundation International, and I kind of was in animal husbandry, but then they needed me in a communications capacity, and yeah, turned out to be a really good fit for me. So yeah, I started working in Indonesia, started working with the Sun Bear organization, got back to the States, was looking for other ways to be involved, and just got a full-time job as an editor, and started volunteering for PASA remotely, and was able to join as a staff member in September. So, and then I just moved out there.
What is PASA's annual budget, and how do you raise that?
Our annual budget for this year is $422,000, and we raised that through, last year grants were a major source of income and donations from individuals were second. I expect that's going to change this year because we're really pushing for more individual donors. And we get support from zoos as well and other animal protection nonprofits. So it's, a wide range of funding sources.
Do you have any relationship at all with the Global Federation of Sanctuaries that we're a member of?
Yeah, we do. Was it 2016? Yeah. We're in touch with them regularly, and I'd say 4 or 5 PASA members are also GFAS members. Like all of their members in Africa, all GFAS members in Africa are PASA members. And in 2016, at our annual strategic development conference, we worked with GFAS to add a couple extra days onto the end of that, which was a workshop more general than PASA and primate specific issues. And so they brought in some speakers who they have contacts with, who are their members from, actually probably more from Asia as well as Africa. And I'm sure that we'll collaborate with them in the future and cross paths with them again.
And how did it happen that you're coming here to see us, which we're delighted about?
Why are you here? In a few days in Jacksonville, there's a conference called ZAC, which is it's a conference of zoos that support conservation around the world and people from those conservation projects around the world that all come together. So we're going to that, and whenever I travel for work, I try to tack on visits to sanctuaries, other animal care facilities where we can spread the word and meet like-minded people.
particularly if you can get extra days in a balmy climate.
Yes, which I'm very
In the
disappointed
dead of
about.
winter.
Jane on Facebook wants to know if you work with Born Free.
Oh yeah, we a couple people from Born Free's sanctuary in Ethiopia were at the workshop that was held jointly with GFAS. We don't, I wouldn't say we work with Born Free, but we're in touch with people there from time to time, and we definitely, one of my goals for this year and next year is to get more involved in CITES, which is, CITES is the international treaty about wildlife trafficking, and Born Free is very involved in CITES, so I'm sure I'll cross paths with them more in the near future. But so I'd say not much now, but I would definitely like to get more engaged with Born Free.
And then Deb wanted to know if there's a problem with these primates that are in close proximity to humans when they're released back to the wild. Does that create any problem with them going into villages or approaching people?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I know that is a major issue with some species. The release sites in Africa that our members use are generally very remote in order to keep the animals safe from poachers. So that, I've never heard of that being an issue. But a lot of these release sites are, I mean, it's crazy. It's like a charter plane and then hours on a boat and then hiking to get to where the animals are. So that's, yeah, that hasn't been an issue. But finding good release sites is a huge challenge. I mean, all of our members would love to do, to reintroduce, and they could reintroduce thousands of primates if there were suitable habitat areas, but there aren't. You know, there's, the risk of poaching is so great, and there's not a lot of habitat left in some areas, and in some places where there is suitable habitat, it's already at capacity with other primates, and if you introduce more, you could start a conflict, which could be awful. So, yes, suitable release sites is the biggest limit for reintroductions, and I think because of the risk of poaching, they don't release in areas where there are many people around.
Michelle's asking if any of the primates in those sanctuaries are coming from labs.
That's a good question. Not right now. Okay, I'll say this. No PASA members right now have primates who are from labs, but I don't know if you guys know about the situation with the New York Blood Center in Liberia, but they were supporting a lab in Liberia, and the lab shut down, and the New York Blood Center continued to fund the care of the chimps, and then about a year and a half ago, they just cut that off with no reason. So the Humane Society of the United States is now funding a project to create a sanctuary, which we all hope will become a PASA member. So at that point the answer will be yes. But right now, I know that by far the majority of animals in the care of PASA member sanctuaries are orphans of the bushmeat trade and other victims of wildlife trafficking.
So is that sanctuary like what you guys are going to use to save more lab?
Well, there just isn't a huge amount of lab research. I'm glad you brought that up because I didn't really fully come around the story. No, but I mean, you brought it up again. It reminded me I didn't fully connect the dots. There's just not a huge amount of lab research being done on primates in Africa. It's just, yeah, out of all the primates in Africa, a really small percentage of them are in lab research, and I don't think any apes are anymore.
And I think that lab that was the New York Blood Center, I think they had stopped using those apes a long time ago.
Yeah.
And they've been supporting them for like 15 years or something. They left them on these islands, but they were still feeding them, paying for the care for them. And they said, well, we don't actually have a legal obligation to do this, so that's it, no more. Basically just leaving them to die on these islands. So.
But basically there's just not a lot of primate lab research being done in Africa. Now in Gabon there's a facility called CIRMF, which is similar. They were using chimpanzees for research. They're still using monkeys for research. They're using chimps for research, and they stopped, but they're committed to take care of the chimps for the rest of their lives.
So do you have any goals for like the U.S.? Like maybe? Because I know we still use monkeys and primates for research.
That's
a lot, actually.
Yeah, and that is a huge issue. That's beyond the scope of PASA right now, but you know, there are primate sanctuaries in the U.S., and there's an organization called NAPSA, which is sort of the North American version of PASA. It's the North American Primate Sanctuary Association, I think. Alliance, thanks. So they're more focused on those issues in the U.S., but I know those, yeah, I would be it looks chimpanzee research in the U.S. is winding down now because of changes in laws, but there's so many monkeys that are in horrible situations, and I don't see any end to that anytime soon. I mean, if PASA was going to expand outside of Africa, I would think that Southeast Asia would be the most reasonable place for us to go next, because it has more similarities than the issues facing primates in the US. But I'm not saying that the issues in the US aren't important, because there are huge welfare problems here as well.
Kathy wants to know what you are teaching people who are currently eating these animals to do instead of eat them. She said it better than I did, but it's already past the screen there.
Yeah, that's a great point. These community-based programs really work best if they're tailored for each community. So there's not a one-size-fits-all approach that you can just run all across Africa. You know, in South Africa, the Vervet Monkey Foundation is teaching cooks or people who cook food in disadvantaged communities to cook vegan diets, and showing them that it's not this weird extreme thing, but actually you can do it with local ingredients, and it's cheaper and healthier than eating animals, which often includes eating wildlife. So that's one option. And it's interesting, the bushmeat hunting has happened, it's been going on for who knows how long, centuries, and it was done as subsistence, just somebody wanted to feed their families. But in recent decades, it's become more of an industry in a lot of Africa, where it's done for profit. You know, some of the hunters don't even eat the bushmeat. They'll shoot wild animals, sell them for profit, and then buy something cheaper, buy chicken or some domestic animal that's cheaper. So in some cases, the bushmeat is eaten because people like the taste more, or because it's cultural, or it's sort of a classy thing. So a lot of our members are working on this cultural approach and letting people know, you know, what you're eating is causing these iconic animals to go extinct. And do you notice that there are a lot fewer of them around than there were when you were a kid? And trying to really change people's thinking in that way. And because obviously, like, very few people in Africa are eating bushmeat for subsistence. You know, there are some, but the majority of it is just a choice. Oh, in the back?
How much are the t-shirts?
T-shirts are $20, and we have a credit card swiper. If you didn't bring cash.
Now we're talking.
Anything else?
You talked about a couple of your initiatives, but if somebody were to plop a big amount of money at you guys, what would you do? What would you do with it?
Well, that's a really good question.
She's very wealthy.
There's a lot in the whole internet.
It's true.
That's an excellent question. One thing, Caitlin talked about the emergency support program, and we're all very concerned. You know, we have enough money set aside that if there's a small emergency, we can help our members. But if there's a major emergency, you know, sort of a storm that just knocks down the buildings, or I mean, for example, the Ebola outbreak that happened in West Africa is a good example, where our members in West Africa lost all their tourism revenue for more than a year. They were losing donations. It's just people had a bad feeling about that whole part of the world. So it isn't the sexiest thing, but setting aside a proper emergency fund that can ensure that these sanctuaries don't collapse if they have an emergency is a really valuable thing. We would also, feel free to chip in if you have thoughts, but we'd also like to build up the work that we're doing to proactively get to the root causes of these problems. You know, just rescuing the animals and giving care isn't really solving the problems. We need to ramp up the education, the community-based programs, you know, especially the programs that are near key wildlife habitat. It's, like I mentioned, you know, these programs are working, but they're done on pretty small scales for the most part in areas around where the sanctuaries are. With more funding, we could ramp up those programs all across Africa and really make a big impact to, you know, reduce exploitation of habitat, reduce bushmeat hunting, educate kids to feel more empathy for wildlife.
I think in our trainings too, in our workshops, a lot of PASA members have said that they would love to have regional conferences and regional workshops. And right now we do an annual strategic development conference, and in the future we want to do something more regional and just put on more workshops. They really, like we said, we had one for the community educators that was really successful. I just think it's a really valuable experience, and a lot of times they just don't, it's a training that they're not ever going to get any other time in their careers. So, there's a lot of ways that our sanctuaries, we can see it from the outside, we can see ways that they need help in just building their capacity, like succession planning, and, I feel like if we had, it would be great if we had more money to host even more workshops, more trainings to really help them with that, particularly with fundraising too. They really need help with fundraising, and we're doing as much as we can at this point. We're, like Greg said, we're sort of limited by the funds that we have available, but yeah, that's always room to grow and expand and build on that.
So for us, one of the major issues is cruelty-free tourism, and how do you have wildlife tourism that doesn't contribute to the problem instead of helping it? Is it fair to assume that the sanctuaries in PASA, if they are open to the public, would be these cruelty-free options for people to be able to experience wildlife and learn more in a way that positively influences the wildlife and the community?
Yeah, absolutely. Most of the PASA member sanctuaries accept visitors, and almost all of them accept volunteers as well. They love volunteers who have some animal care experience. So those absolutely are reliable ways to get up close with wildlife and not worry if you're inadvertently supporting animal exploitation. Scott, we were just talking earlier about how it's, whenever my wife and I travel, we try to visit sanctuaries and similar organizations, and more often than not, we do some digging and find out that it's just glorified exploitation called sanctuary or called conservation. But our accreditation process is really thorough, and we definitely wouldn't allow an organization to stay a member if they were using animals for making money.
So here, obviously, the cats that we have in captivity, the ones who were born in captivity, can't be released. But you're saying that reintegration is an option. So how do they combat in the sanctuaries? Because you're obviously not going to fix the animals if you're going to try to reintegrate them into the wild. But how do they combat possible overpopulation in the sanctuary by having animals that are not fixed? Or do they do that? Do they go ahead and fix them? Or do you know, because you wouldn't want to have an animal fixed if it was, going to reintegrate into the wild.
Yeah. So typically they don't neuter or spay primates. They just keep them on contraception.
Oh,
yeah.
Usually use implants.
And it's funny, I had the reverse question when I was here doing our tour. I'm like, oh, what contraception do you use? Primate, big cat difference, yeah. So
I thought that was an odd question. It was like
but for primates, we're always like, what type of contraception do you use?
And that's a constant issue for the sanctuaries, because a lot of them use implants that they go in the arm and they last 2 to 3 years, but they can pull out the implants, and contraception is one of those things that we're always trying to figure out the best method. But for animals that are expected to be released, the PASA procedure is to use reversible contraception. Some use daily tablets as well. They'll just put them in honey or in a banana and then throw them to the chimps.
I know with us, social media is huge, of getting all the messages out, our mission and what we're trying to do and get it across. And I haven't had a chance to look at your social media presence, but do each one of your member sanctuaries kind of have their own Facebook page, or do you the guiding force and you have one that you do stories about each one of the member sanctuaries and videos and things to engage people and let them know that you are there and you need money?
Yeah.
Yep, both.
Yeah, this is very much a work in progress. And actually, we showed you guys our social media accounts, and please follow us because they're building those accounts, or like the page, or like posts and share it with your friends. But yeah, it's actually all different, and it depends on the sanctuary. Some of them, they have better access to internet than others, and some of them also just have more volunteers or more staff that are able to sort of take those videos and produce content. So some of them have a much better presence on social media than others do, and some have gone on Instagram, some are, still haven't. We are trying to, make something more cohesive between all the members and between PASA. We reshare their stories all the time. And like I said, we're building out our accounts. So in the past, so far, we've put a lot of energy towards Facebook. But yeah, you'll start to see us on Twitter now. We're on Instagram. We're posting regularly. That also came because we have volunteers now. We've expanded as well. So we're in a better position to do that. But yeah, and we reshare their stories. That's a great way, but by following us is a great way to, find out what's happening at the sanctuaries. And, we also have emails that we send out to all of our followers, and everything that's in the email also gets posted on social media as well. Anything else you want to add to that?
No, it's definitely a priority for us to build it up more. Anything else? We've probably run over time anyway.
Thank you
All
so
right,
much.
Thank you. This has been a lot of fun. You guys have been a really, really great group to talk with. Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Guys.